But 3-4 years ago, these kinds of things would totally agitate me because I had a really strong set desire for an outcome, whether it's that big day of work, whether it's a release of not realizing that it's, I'm just investing in that desire more. I'm just adding more dynamite to the thing that's going to blow up again and again and again. Versus you see the agitation and you're like, we put all these coverings and then we work our entire lives around this, like being in a tiny little shed instead of just where's life's meaning.
Welcome everyone to a really special Daily Vedantic episode. This is a longer form conversation that I had with one of my favorite creative people on the planet, Justin Boreta. He has been part of the pioneering electronic trio, the Glitch Mob, now starting his own solo musical journey under the name Boreta, his last name, but also a member of the Venice Vedanta Club and daily student of Advaita Vedanta under the same teacher, Swami Parthasarathi, as myself. And it's just a joy every time I get to chat with him, but especially so on an occasion like this, where we got to gather with about 50 people here in Venice for a really unique Venice Vedanta Club start to the Friday. And if you're in the LA area and want to join one of our future Venice Vedanta Club hangs, we do them every first Friday of the month here in Venice. You can shoot us a note on Instagram. Just DM the Daily Vedantic and we will add you to the email list. Just shoot us a direct message on the Daily Vedantic's Instagram page and we will add you to the email list and let you know about all of our upcoming events. So without further delay, let's get into this wide-ranging philosophical conversation with one of the most creative individuals I know, Justin Boreta.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, and welcome to Neuhaus for those that have never been here before. And welcome to today's Magic Morning event. If you've never been to one of the Magic Mind morning events, welcome to that. I see a bunch of friendly faces, a bunch of familiar faces from the previous events. And this is, I was just saying it downstairs, the community that is forming around these events, independent of whether you like Magic Mind or not, is the coolest aspect of building this company by far, which we will touch on a little bit more here in a few minutes, but I'll give a brief introduction. I am James Beshara, creator of Magic Mind and head janitor, plumber, electrician, whatever needs to be done day to day. I am down to do it. We've got a few team members here like Merritt and Tyler who put on these events for us. So big round of applause to them for all of the work that they do, whether it's the beach yoga, whether it's the open state sound breathwork experiences, whether it's these cool philosophy club hangs, Malibu Mansion hangs. It's so fun to get to do these things with the community that we have, but it's also so fun to just arrive and all of the logistics are done, which is huge. Huge kudos to them for doing all of the heavy lifting for the logistics. I've got a special guest this is our second Philosophy Club hang here at Neuhaus. The first one was it just blew away any expectations. I thought, because this philosophy that we're going to talk about today, I mentioned it last time, 1 in 10,000 people find this stuff interesting. And I just came to it just knowing, 8 people, 10 people might show up. And it was a packed room just like today. And so it is, I don't think it'll ever not blow me away that this many people find this philosophy and a philosophical approach to life interesting or intriguing. One of my closest friends, Justin here, is one such individual where he will send me questions about the Bhagavad Gita or send me questions about the Vedas, the Upanishads, questions about anything regarding philosophy, and it just blows me away that he's interested. I shouldn't be so blown away, but I don't know why. I just candidly always am. And the reason I'm so blown away is because Justin is a mentor of mine in music creation. Justin was a founder and creator of the electronic trio Glitch Mob, which many in the crowd may know. And they're like in the pantheon of amazing groundbreaking electronic artists, and we got to know each other through music. And then maybe 2 conversations in, we really connected even more deeply around philosophy. And he's been coming to Venice Vedanta Club meetings since maybe a year ago or so was the first one.
Yeah, about that.
And so I thought today, and I'll have you introduce a little bit about yourself and your path to philosophy. I thought for today, for a Venice crowd, there would be no better conversation than a conversation at the intersection of creativity and philosophy. And I figured, well, I'd invite one of the most creative musicians and artists. He's also a super well-known generative artist out there. And I thought, man, there'd be no better conversation than to have a Q&A with you and then open it up for Q&A with the crowd and discussion with the crowd. And there will also be a nice little communal aspect to the conversation that'll happen in a few minutes where each of you will get to chat with your neighbors as well. But to kick it off, Justin, do you mind sharing a little bit about your background, maybe starting with creativity and creating, building as an artist, and then weaving into how you got here today and the philosophical path you've taken in life?
Thank you, James. That is a deep question, and I spent a number of years exploring so many different aspects of spiritual practice. Ever since I was pretty young, I was into meditation. I had Alan Watts books around my house growing up, and I had a computer in my room, and I was tinkering and making beats ever since I was in my early teens. And I got into the world of live music and playing in a band accidentally. Like, I never intended to do that. I was always doing other stuff, but the glitch mob just happened and emerged as a lot of really good things do. And my spiritual life and the creative life were always kind of one thing. And when I really got into it, it was transcendental meditation that got me in. And then I've gone down the rabbit hole of every sort of psychedelic journey and modality one could try. And to fast forward a bit, when we first started talking and you handed me The Fall of the Human Intellect, because we hung out once and you were talking about the Bhagavad Gita, and I was like, yeah, what is this? And I had read Ram Dass and Alan Watts and all of these people who were essentially summarizing these texts, but I had never really gone to the source of it. So when you handed me this book, I couldn't really make heads or tails of it for a little bit. I was like, what? I set it down and I came back to it a couple months later and picked it up, and then something just clicked, and the whole thing.
How long ago was that, you think?
It was probably a year and a half ago that I really started reading it. I read that book, then I read the Vedanta treatise, and then in January I started the e-learning practice.
When you say, just going back to with Glitch Mob, you were always making things, but then with Glitch Mob, it sort of emerged as all the best things do, I think is maybe what you said, to paraphrase. Could you actually build that out a little bit for us? Because I think a lot of us think that they don't just emerge, that you have to force them to emerge. And that's an interesting choice of words.
I love the idea of emergence so much, and all of the best. I mean, we've released so many albums, and I have a whole practice of releasing ambient music with wisdom on top of it as well. And all of the best moments of that felt like it emerged from a process of presence, and it wasn't planned. And there was times when we thought, okay, I'm going to do this thing because this is going to perform well in the marketplace, blah, blah, blah. And that doesn't mean that it's inherently a failure, but the best stuff always just came out of trusting the process. And, this morning when I was journaling and reflecting about all of the things that I had learned in my very high level understanding of Vedanta. I don't really feel like I'm even really a beginner at this point, but one of the things that has been so useful is what you just said, is letting go of outcomes. And for me, the Vedanta practice has helped me stop overthinking all the time, because it's just usually when I'm overthinking, I'm looking at this thing, I'm creating something, and I'm thinking, well, what is it going to be? How are they going to receive it? How much money is it going to make? And then it's just back back to the thing. And it has really more than any of those other things I mentioned, meditation, ceremony, psychedelics. I mean, those are super important to me in other ways, but on a more practical level, that has been a tool that I use every day.
You're being quite humble to build out Justin's practice a little bit more. You had a copy of the Bhagavad Gita for like 20 years. He's listened to great teachers like Ram Dass. We've both been fans of Alan Watts. You were a fan for 15 years before picking up Follow the Human Intellects. and to sign up for daily lectures with the ashram that I study with. And by the way, when we open it up for Q&A, this conversation, this discussion group makes space for any and all philosophies. That's one of the most beautiful things about the philosophy of the Vedas, which is not only the oldest philosophy in the world, but I stopped to try to even understand how it makes space for almost any philosophical concept. It's so anyone can bring in any concept that's touched them, that's moved them, that's influenced them in their life, almost any philosophical teacher, and it weaves so effortlessly within the Vedas or the Upanishads, even if you're hearing those words for the first time today. But so it is interesting that the more that there is a contemplative approach to life, the less you feel like you know. And you feel like I'm 10 years into studying and very lightly teaching this philosophy for the last 2 years. And every day it's more of a wonderment and a letting go than it is any feeling of mastery of sorts. One, I'll pause there to see if that brings up any reflections, but then I want to talk about the creative side of your life and philosophy after that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the I love you use this phrase, knowledge bombs, and I think about this as I'm reading. I read the Vedanta treatise, and then Swamiji has a book where he translated the Upanishads, and just reading that one really, really gets me. But when I first started digesting and understanding the fact that the definition of this reality is unknowable, like we can't know, there is something extremely liberating for me that I'm like, I'm not really trying to understand and wrap my head around it, because it's way, way beyond what we are capable of knowing. And that was one of those things that was helpful to me. And I do also find there's so much paradox in the teachings. The more I know, the less I know. The more I hang on, the less I get at the attach you lose, detach you gain. I mean, I might as well get that tattooed on my forehead. It's just so good.
And knowledge bombs is you nailed my favorite aspect of philosophy in general. It could be Socratic, Platonic. It could be St. Augustine. It could be Christ, Buddha. It could be Vedanta. Vedanta means into the Vedas. So you'll hear me talk about these 4 textbooks, the oldest philosophical textbooks we have on the planet, called the Vedas quite often. But it's another word for Vedanta, and Sanskrit just loves to throw 12 words at the same thing. Vedanta means end of the Vedas. It also means end of knowledge, because Veda means knowledge or truth, so end of truth. It's a play on words of the culmination of truth, culmination of knowledge. Another term for it is Upanishads, which are the texts that sit at the logistical end of the Vedas, because the Vedas will be filled with things like how to clean a wound or how to prepare food. But the end of the Vedas, that's the crystallized philosophy of the Indus Valley, of cradle of civilization in many ways. And they go back 8,000 years, at least the written version. So who knows how long how far back the oral tradition will go back. But the philosophy, another word for the philosophy is Sanatana Dharma, which means eternal principles. Again, like I said, it's one of the many blessings and curses of Sanskrit is they'll throw 12 words for the same thing. But Sanatana Dharma, which means eternal principles, it's basically 25, 26 principles that you can apply to life. Creative process, you could apply it to a meeting you might have in an hour from now. And it's so damn practical, and that's why I love that Aldous Huxley called it the practical philosophy. But knowledge bombs are the way that I think about it. And if you hear us talk about all these different books or different things that are referenced today, you can also start with the first episode of the Daily Vedantic, which is 15 minutes long, and it summarizes the whole philosophy. So you can just Google Daily Vedantic or go to the dailyvedantic.com, and you can get the whole philosophy in 15 minutes. But that episode also has a handful of my favorite knowledge bombs, which you just touched on. These principles, I call them knowledge bombs because in many ways you hear them and you cannot friggin' unhear them. One of which is, wisdom is the capacity to see the end in the beginning, which I'd never heard a definition of wisdom that just blew my mind like that and is in one sweet, succinct phrase. Another knowledge bomb that you just touched on, which is attach, you lose, detach, you gain, which could not be more, it couldn't be more relevant to relationships, work, creative process.
All of it.
All of it. When you say that that's a knowledge bomb that you feel like you could tattoo on your forehead, I know I wanted to ask you about your creative process and how it's shifted with a philosophical approach, before and after. But do you mind? You just keep saying things that I want to peel the onion back to understand more. Why does that one come to mind of one that you'd want to metaphorically tattoo on your forehead?
I feel like maybe 90% of the annoyances or disturbances or difficulty I experience throughout the day, throughout a given day, is because I am attached to something, that I am forcing something, I'm overthinking something, and it's such an easy way to just look at it and to let go and to actively surrender to whatever is happening. And that it applies for me to, as you said, to relationships, and especially to creativity, which obviously extends so much beyond art. But when I feel like I'm in my ego, and my ego is trying to do all of these things and construct a situation, construct work, versus, as I said before, I love the idea of emergence when I'm present, because the other powerful piece of this, I would say, is concentration. I'm grateful that I have a meditation practice, and I did for many years before this, because the ability to focus on one thing for long periods of time, I feel like is really a superpower these days, and I certainly always has been, as they've been saying it for thousands and thousands of years.
What is, I keep burying the lead further on the creative side of things, but out of curiosity, and I've never asked you this before, but out of all, as a purveyor of philosophy, Justin's been nominated for a Grammy for weaving philosophy in his music for years. So as a purveyor of philosophy for a long, long time before Fall of Human Intellect, which is maybe an hour-long read of one of our teacher's books. Swami is what you'll hear us say often. What about this philosophy spoke to you to where you're like, okay, I've seen what's out there. I kind of want to go deep within this philosophy. A year and a half ago, from 15-year plus journey of going wide with things.
In reading a lot of people that have summarized various texts, like use Alan Watts for an example, which, when we did some music with his vocals, I spent, it feels like thousands of hours of listening. I've essentially listened to everything that he's put out there, looking for the perfect snippet. And I feel like there was a gentle, a diffusion of my worldview that came through that. However, so much of this is the combination of the practicality, but with the daily practice. That was, since I'm reading a book and I'm sitting there musing on philosophy and musing on life, and I sort of set it down and go back about my life. But the way that there is a thing that you move through every day, that, and he repeats a lot of the same things over and over and over again. So I'm up early in the morning, clear, listening to this thing, and it's just drilling in my head, and that was
Alan Watts, or is this Swami?
This is Swamiji. Yeah, and that was the thing where there's the way that there is a process to step through versus a book to just muse on. Maybe if there was an Alan Watts 3-year lecture process, that I would probably get a lot from it too. But there's something about the way that he has created this process to move through that
systematic approach.
Yes, the systematic approach was really what did it. And obviously there's so much more about the philosophy itself, but I think that piece, and also I would never have considered myself to be a morning person. On tour, I'm playing shows in places all over the world from 12 to 2 in the morning, sometimes playing at 3 or 4 in the morning, it was total chaos for a sleep schedule, and I would typically work until 2 in the morning, then go to bed and wake up at 10. And over the past couple of years that has shifted, but with this, I remember when you first were like, I get up at 4:30. I was like, what? You wake up at 4:30? And when I was like, okay, James is getting up at 4:30, I gotta try this. And I was like, I'm gonna wake up and text you at 4:30 every day for a week. And after a while, I started to really get it. And so being up early in the morning where the only thing I'm doing is this spiritual practice, this reflection, that was another piece of this where frankly, I think that you could learn and master so many things with this one method, but then combined with
when you say one method, with what method? The daily, starting the day with a reflection?
Absolutely, yeah.
You can give, by the way, the long form answers. I want to know the long form answers to these questions. So please wax as long as you'd like. On that point of the 4:30 aspect, I could hear voices of listeners or people maybe in the crowd being like, I'm on board with some of this shit, but like 4:30, that's insane.
It's a little extreme.
Yeah, that's a little extreme. And I was that person. I listened to, similar to you, Alan Watts. And for those that don't know, Alan Watts, beautiful, unbelievable melodic British accent lecturer that one of our other, I think I mentioned it last time, one of the other great teachers, this guy, Ram Dass, he called he was a Harvard-trained psychologist, one of the smartest guys in the 60s, 70s, and philosophical titans. Even Ram Dass called Alan Watts, this British Episcopalian priest, that then became a amazing bridge between Eastern and Western philosophy. Even Ram Dass called him the most erudite, articulate human that he's ever known. So most well-read and most articulate. So Alan Watts' beautiful soul, beautiful voice, but not a systematic approach. It's much more almost like, as he would say, it's entertainment. These philosophical concepts are entertainment. And there was a switch in my approach too, where it was like, okay, several years of my 20s, 3, 4, 5 years would go by of these are really fun, entertaining concepts, to where I wanted to study it more systematically and wanted to study the actual source material that Alan Watts or Carl Jung or Emerson, Thoreau, Schopenhauer, or Joseph Campbell. I wanted to go into the philosophy that they were studying each day instead of just hearing their interpolations of it. And then I got to that part where it's like, oh, this is something you're supposed to do before the sun rises. And I was like, there's no fucking way. I was a night owl through and through. All of college, the earliest time I ever took a class was 11. Only once when I had to take a class before noon, because I was like, no, I'm down to be up at 4, but I'm going to stay up all the way through the night to be up at 4. And I thought that was impossible. And now fast forward a few years, this was, I guess, almost a decade ago. And when I had that view, and now I'm like, that's my best friend, is waking up at 4:30.
Can I ask you what your creative practice or like your approach to the things you're doing in your life, how did that change before and after that moment?
That's the question I would love to ask you as well. So I want to hear your answer. But the short version of it is, it's with extreme clarity now. And said another way, my 20s, I came out of college going 150 miles an hour. Started 2 companies, with the intention of figuring out which one has more legs to it, and then I'm going to focus on that. But I started them, one of them my senior year, started the other one while working for a nonprofit in Cape Town, South Africa. I studied development economics, worked in poverty alleviation, while also scheming with these two startup ideas. Would take one of them to the heart of Silicon Valley and raise $70 million for it from these titans of Silicon Valley, all investing in it. Take it to $400 million valuation by the time I was 26, to a fire sale 4 years after that, right before my 30th birthday, and failure in so many ways, in this high-profile way, but going 150 miles an hour for, from 22 graduating till 29, and checking every box that I could have wanted to check, even selling the company, fire sale, but we were just able to get it over the finish line to sell it to Airbnb. And from my bedroom, scheming and coming up with a cool idea that I thought was going to be really powerful, to selling to Airbnb halfway around the world in the heart of Silicon Valley. I was like, okay, I'm still happy with this, but man, is that not how it sent me to the ER. The heart condition, had to have my heart paddled, those little things from the movies, had to have my heart shocked back into rhythm with a cardioversion. So it was like traveling 150 miles an hour with a muddy as shit windshield, with maybe a square inch to see, but I'm going 100, the speedometer says I'm going 150 miles an hour. And who in the right mind would think that that's okay to take a Ferrari out on the highway 150 miles an hour, and you got a Ferrari and it's going fast, and you're quote unquote driving fast, but running into other cars, running into ditches, and seemingly moving, but doing it with a lot of disclarity and a lot of all of the inherent fear, worry, awareness that this doesn't feel right, but if I just, maybe I'll go 160 miles an hour, I'm not going fast enough. Now, cruise at 50 miles an hour with a clear windshield, running into the sides of mountains, just cruising each day with like what feels like the equivalent of Tesla autopilot, just cruising it for me. So that's metaphorically the difference, and logistically the difference is one company sent me to the ER, fire sale, bunch of cool, meaningless, but checking the boxes of certain things that looked like it was succeeding on the outside, bunch of Time Magazine World Changer, 30 under 30 lists, all these different things, and a failure, an insane stress, to now 3 little kids, 3 companies, 2 philosophy podcasts that 40 people listen to, and making music, as well as surfing 4 times a week, and I feel like it's effortless. Tens of millions in revenue, and just enjoying every step of it. I haven't had a single night in 4 years of building Magic Mind where I've woke up worried about something, which blows my mind away, because it was the exact opposite 10 years ago. So that's the logistical difference, but also the metaphorical difference. What about you? What has been a shift in your creative endeavors or process or mindset before a philosophical approach? Take me back to your 20s, and then also in the last perhaps year and a half that it's become more deliberate.
I think that as you were describing that, I was going back to a memory. So in 2015, I went after tour. I got off tour and I went to do a Vipassana retreat, which is like 10 days silent meditation, meditating all day, pretty much all of your waking hours, aside from some Dharma talks. And that was the moment where my creative process and my approach to life switched from kind of willy-nilly, I'm working whenever I can or whenever I want or whenever I have time, to having a more a disciplined framework or some more regularity with it. And then after that, I went deep with this teacher named Tara Brach, who has these incredible guided meditations for free online. And it hit me that I had done something kind of like this, even though it wasn't methodical, in the systematic way. I have always been drawn to moving through something, and Tara Brach takes it one step outside of mindfulness. I don't know if people have meditation practices here, but with TM, it's very much just one thing. It's focused on mindfulness. And with Tara Brach, it started to expand into these other things, matters of the heart and relationships. And one big one for me was just understanding how powerful equanimity is. It's sort of
What do you mean by that?
The ability to take what life throws at me and stay centered, and be present with it too, not to dodge or hide or push back, but just be there with it. And moving through so many different practices like this, coming to the comfort of this philosophy, it feels like an infinite rabbit hole too, right? Because the clarity that I get from getting up early, and I feel almost as if myself before and after those sessions I'm a completely different person. It's almost like I just snap into place. I'm like, okay, so now I rely on it and I trust it, and I trust the order of things and the divine to do what it's going to do. And there's something so comforting about trusting the philosophy, trusting the process to unfold. And so I agree with you. For me also, I feel much more clear. It's gotten me a sense of clarity, and obviously all of the things that led up to this. And I'm certainly far from perfect when it comes to any of this or the discipline, but I do have a regular cadence to my day that I think has allowed me to create so much art, music, such.
Has the intention behind the reasons behind creating? I'm sure we have many people here in Venice. I mean, it's perhaps the most creative pocket of geographical pocket, maybe one of the most creative in the history of the world. So many creators here, startup founders, early stage startup employees, musicians, artists that might be here in the audience. Or those that feel yearning to create, and it might just be on the side, but that yearning is still there. Has your intention and the reason that you create shifted over the last, say, from when you started in Glitch Mob and you're kind of like on the main stage of the world to now, today what's today? We've got Friday morning in October and the reasons to create.
There's something so powerful for me about having this thing to orient around. I feel oriented, where in the past, before any of this philosophy, I was still making some music and creating albums that had the magic touch, or I just, for whatever was going on in life, I would let go of the outcome and just have fun and make a song, and it would be successful, whatever that means. But with this, the sense that there's something to come back to and orient myself, and the intention now is to simply just make an offering. I am devoted to this practice, to the mastery of this music, and to understanding myself more. So I feel like I have gotten more reliably good results in completing things from the sense that, has anyone here read the Rick Rubin Creative Act book? Which is great. I read that before I did the e-learning, and it's fascinating to me that I'd say maybe 80% of it feels I've found it in the Vedanta treatise as well, and it is powerful for me to go back, because that book also changed my creative practice. But the ability to come back to this thing that it's like, how to describe the offering thing. He has this thing where he says, if you make a piece of art, how could you judge someone else's piece of art? It's a diary entry. People have probably seen that video. It's just a diary entry. We overthink it. And to me, moving over to the Vedantic lens, he wouldn't necessarily say it's a diary entry, but it's just an offering. It's like, oh, I'm just making this thing and putting it out, and I'm going to make another one.
Keep going. You kind of cut yourself off there. I want to hear more of that on the offering versus your perhaps intention before.
The diary entry thing is powerful because when I'm creating anything, it's so easy to get lost in this hall of mirrors ego maze around what this thing is going to be. But and when I wake up in the morning and I still journal and reflect. I don't ever look at that piece of paper and go, this journal entry sucks. God,
no one's gonna fucking like this entry.
Just write it and move on. So the ability to create something as an offering, and I will say another piece of this is that liberating this idea of God not being some judgmental bearded man in the sky, but a thing that I am and we all are. And so when I'm making an offering, I feel like sound is God, music is God, we are all God. So when I'm thinking of the people that are listening and the process of making the sound, it's this very fluid back and forth between those two things. So as an offering, it's just whatever is coming out in that moment, as imperfect as it is.
And you just touched on the and we mentioned this last month, and it's also in the first episode of Daily Vedantic, where it is the deep end of the pool of this philosophy is, and this is the entirety of the oldest philosophical text in the world, in 3 words: that thou art. Tattvamasi is the Sanskrit. That thou art. Or as Alan Watts would colloquially say it, you're it. As Emerson would say it, you are what you're seeking. What Rumi said, what you are searching for is searching for you. And the end of this philosophy, the end of the Vedas, the culmination of knowledge is this unthinkable phrase that thou art. You are that. Unthinkable. I say unthinkable because, one, since the world at large doesn't want us to ever think that. It sounds sacrilegious to even say that. Even the words of you are God, it's not you are this distinguished, separate, highest power that lords over everything. That is the exact opposite of what it's saying, but that is the Western connotation of the divine. Is this monarchical, hierarchical, superiority object driven from an inferiority complex. But what is really being said if we can open our ears to this, is really just the perception of plurality. It's actually a reality of unity. That's the whole philosophy in perhaps more thinkable words than you are that. Because that can be quite heavy, or that can feel like, no. I'm separate. I'm this tiny little thing in this grand cosmos. I ain't that. The other practical sides of a philosophical approach, or the practical sides of philosophy like Advaita Vedanta or Vedanta, or Stoicism, which is the internalization of Socratic philosophy. The other practical parts, that's really, I dig those. But getting to the end of the story of that thou art, now I can't handle that. But another way of saying it, to repeat it, is just in the perception of plurality. You, me, Justin, myself. Me in this environment. You in this environment. What this philosophy is saying and has been saying, it is the oldest concept in humanity, is that there is unity. That's Christ's last prayer. Even for people in the West that view Christ as God, the prayer that Christ prayed the night of the Last Supper was, may they see the unity that we see. in colloquial terms. That's all. It's his prayer. That is even from the most growing up Roman Catholic, from the most Catholic hierarchical reverence for Christ as separate, distinguished, superior, and the Lord of all. He's teaching his disciples to pray to see the unity, where the default, our default is to see plurality, separation. In fact, diablos, the root of the word devil, is to be thrown apart. Shaitan is the word for the devil in Islam is distance, means distance. That unity aspect is perhaps hits at the core for creativity, for unleashing creativity. And this is just it's a beautiful wave that we get to ride in this conversation to end it on this point before we open up for Q&A. That sense of unity, where maybe the prior sense I know in my life was separateness of, I want to do this so that I can rise to the top, so I can be on top of the mountain, so that I can be safe, so I can engineer some financial outcome, so that I can be good, so I can be free. All of these partial concepts in my head of what success was. What is so interesting is that egoistic approach, which is just seeing separateness, and investing in that separateness created so much fucking stress, agitation.
Yes. Pain.
And the perception, cultivation, daily perception of unity of us in this room right now, us in this conversation, making art that I hope is inspiring to my daughters that are listening to it while I'm making it. That perception of unity, or cultivation of that perception of unity, is because it's certainly it's infinitesimal compared to the lighthouses throughout history that tell us to keep going. But when you start to scratch at the surface of seeing unity where you may have previously seen disunity, separateness, the creativity that gets unleashed is unbelievable. And I'd love to hear from you, why has that been so? Boreta, in the last year and a half, 2 years, Justin's last name is Boreta, has gone from Glitch Mob to a few different projects, creating generative art, creating Grammy-nominated album in Superposition, the ambient space. You have your own project coming out here in a few months, own music project. Your creativity has been, seems to be unleashed in the last year and a half with what seems to be like a very simple, innocuous shift to, I don't know, starting the day off with philosophy. Would love to see if I'm projecting. I'm sure I'm projecting a bit, but projecting properly, directionally correct, and you feeling like it's been unleashed. And would love to know what goes through your mind when you kind of approach your creative process, literally like today.
Yeah, so when I get into a topic, I go super, super, super deep. I just get absolutely obsessed with it. And when I first started listening to e-learning, I would also...
By the way, e-learning, it's just the ashram has an app. It's as all ashrams should in 2020.
I love it's called e-learning too.
Yeah, they call it e-learning like it's straight out in 1993. But it's just online lectures, just watching online lectures each morning.
It's an hour lecture in the morning, and sets my day off right. And also I was listening to the podcast quite a bit. If I was driving, I was listening to YFYI because I felt like it was a conversational way to ingest and muse on this. And there is an episode that there's a concept that you and Joseph are talking about that really hit me. And there was this idea of your Swadharma and the feeling that when I know that music is this thing, and as I'm working on it and as I'm focusing on this thing, I feel like there is a tailwind, there is a sense of the universe conspiring to help me create this thing. And I would say because of really narrowing in on that thing for myself, which, I mean, I've been doing music for a long time, but I was also doing tons of other shit. it helped me stop doing all of this other stuff and feeling spread thin and just do this thing only, which is moving more towards a sense of depth and mastery. So it's depth, not breadth. But I'm curious, because for me, that concept was so powerful. If you could expand on that a little bit more.
Yeah, Swadharma, especially on a conversation at the intersection of creativity and philosophy. Within this philosophy, it's so helpfully complete, and that there isn't an aspect of life that it doesn't apply to. As I say on YFY, which is the conversational 45-minute episodes with Joseph, one of my teachers. We both, all three of us, study under this teacher, Swami Parthasarathi in India, who's 97 years old, so I don't get as much direct time with Swamiji as I do with Joseph. On the conversational side, Daily Vedantic is more 5-10 minute episodes of just me, yammering in a microphone. But the concept of Swadharma and this philosophy, like I said, it's so damn complete in every aspect. Something that I'll mention on both of these podcasts is that there wasn't, growing up, there's not necessarily like a Christian way of brushing my teeth. There's no Socratic way of walking down the street. There is a Vedantic way to brush your teeth. Not like in a prescriptive sense, because this philosophy, like I said, you can summarize the whole thing in 15 minutes. It's so contextual to you applying it to your life, where you are in the morning, what you're doing, brushing your teeth. But it is, even that becomes an offering. It's a quote, a knowledge bomb from Swamiji is, work without attachment is worship. And work without attachment is worship. It's so similar to Rick Rubin's read Vedanta treatise, by the way. Joseph is the one that gave him a copy in Malibu years ago. And this concept of work without attachment is worship. Just as a slight aside, I was with Stephen Pressfield, 5 days ago, who's the author of The War of Art. Cult classic book, 20 years ago. Have you ever read The War of Art?
Oh, yeah.
And so Stephen Pressfield, just an OG of guiding creatives and creating amazing art. And he said, he goes, your line from Swami, I use it now in my writing. He does a writing seminar, like an all-day writing seminar on certain days of the month for people. And he's like a 12-time best-selling artist or best-selling author. So he's crazy accomplished author. And at the end of the writing seminar, the 8-hour writing seminar, he ends it with work without attachment is worship. To unlock the creativity, if you make it about yourself, you can, and you might be able to suffer through it, get something out the door. You might be able to start something, get people around it, fire sell it to Airbnb if you're lucky, or you can make it an offering, brushing your teeth, making music, creating a company like Magic Mind, making an offering to your community, shifts everything, orients you to something that generates energy versus dissipates energy. And that can be on kind of the broader side of things, the higher level, the macro side of things. On the micro side of things, the orienting concept that I think about every day is Swadharma, which means your nature. Swadharma is just, like I said, Sanskrit for, there's a few different concepts for it, but the one that's used most frequently, Swadharma, which means your essence, your nature. And Swadharma, the concept, is all about getting you to orient to what is your nature. It might be to make music. It might be to be a business person. It might be to be an amazing teacher. It might be to be a phenomenal bricklayer. But a surrender to your Swadharma, that is your highest offering to your community. And this goes hand in glove into Carl Jung's principle of individuation, which is so helpful for creatives as well, where the synopsis of Carl Jung's concept of individuation, have people heard of this concept of individuation before? I see some heads nodding. So Carl Jung also studied Vedanta daily, and it's just taken from the concept of Swadharma. He called it individuation, where he said, in your 20s and the beginning of your life, you just want to belong. You want to belong. You want to belong. You want to belong. You kind of study those that belong. And imagine it's a village 200 years ago, and you're like, all right, and these 300 people in the village, the doctor belong. Everybody loves the doctor. I'm going to be the doctor. You're 18, 19, 20, 21. You're like, I'm going to be the doctor. I'm going to belong. If I'm the doctor, I'm going to be, everybody's going to appreciate me, and I'm going to belong. So you study it, almost academically, of who are the people that belong, and then I'm going to be that. And then he said at about age 29, you realize after you're tiring yourself out, you're like, oh, shit, there's like 8 people trying to be the doctor. And I'm like 7th on the list. And I've been struggling at this, and people aren't giving me the signals that I belong, and they aren't giving me the validation. I don't think that I'm going to be the doctor, and no one really cares when I show up and try to help them. They're like, no, we want the other 5 people that we know are better doctors than you in this 300-person village. And you get to the point where, in your attempt to belong, you just surrender to, oh, God, I've been trying for a decade now. I'm not going to be the doctor. I'm not going to belong. Fine. I'm just going to give up on that dream. And you individuate. Not you individualize. Individualize would mean to separate. But you individuate through giving up on that attempt out of mere exhaustion and maybe perceived failure. And then you recognize, like, God, I've always loved working with metal. People need, their horseshoes fixed. I'll start working on the metal with the local blacksmith, and I'll just go in the shop, see where I can be helpful, because I got to get paid. I can't get the doctor apprenticeship that I've wanted, in this village example. And you just start hammering away at metal, start fixing some axes, some swords, and 6-7 years go by, 35, 36, and you're a freak. Everybody loves the metal work that you do. Even your mentor is like, dude, that's phenomenal. You're doing amazing work. And by the time you're 36, 37, I don't know why he settled on these ages. I bet in our regressed modern society, it's probably 10 years removed. Maybe it's more like 39. Where we just like say, I know for me, it was probably around 33 where I was like, I've been trying to be this thing, and I'm not this thing, and I'm put myself into the ER and stressed out of my mind, getting 5 hours sleep, tearing my hair out. I'm not that thing. All right, fine. I'll go into the wilderness and just figure out what I can do to make ends meet or to start to serve those nearest to me. Just be useful to the people around me. And then the blacksmith realizes, oh, that's what I was meant to do. And the blacksmith then becomes as revered, loved, like the doctor. Belongs not through imitation or through selfish pursuit to belong, but belongs because of surrender. 18th chapter of the Gita. Surrender to a duty-bound existence, and immediate peace follows. The Bhagavad Gita, which touched on, I think I mentioned it last time, it's a 27-minute read. It's the whole philosophy. It's all of philosophy in one 30-minute read. It's not like it's like one huge thing that you reference this, cross-reference these things. The whole thing, the whole conversation is a warrior prince having a complete meltdown on this battlefield, in the middle of the battlefield before this great big battle that's 13 years in the making is about to take place, has this complete breakdown and has a conversation with his charioteer. And the Bhagavad Gita is just this poem, the world's most famous poem, 2,500-year-old poem, and it's a conversation between this warrior prince that's having this breakdown and his charioteer. And at the end of it, the whole thing is surrender to a duty-bound existence and immediate peace follows. Couldn't be in higher contrast to the world, of what the world tells us, of what we're all trying to do so much of our lives to try to be that doctor, where it's like, I'm going to make the world surrender. I'm going to submit the world. Startups, Silicon Valley, after a decade, it's almost like you get numb to the phrase, like, we're going to dominate this space. We're going to destroy these incumbents. We're going to disrupt, to own it, to put it in like a submissive hold. Headlock instead of, all right, I'm just going to surrender to this thing owning me. And like a surfer does, I'm just going to surrender to the wave. And before you know it, you're cruising 200 yards down this beautiful line, having the time of your life. And Swadharma is that concept of individuation, is that concept of surrender rather than stronghold. All right, we'll open up for conversation for you all. But before we do that, I would love to take 3 minutes for people to talk to the people to your left and right, to just talk about what intrigued you to come to something like this, a philosophy hang on a Friday morning in Venice, and then we'll open it up for Q&A between everyone. So everyone, feel free to chat with the people to your left and right of why did you choose to come to this out of all the things you could come to in the coolest city in the world of LA. Go for it. Touching into my Matthew McConaughey Texas roots. All right, all right, all right. So there will be, after about 15 minutes of Q&A, it will be open for the community. I'll be up here for the next 30 minutes after the Q&A, and the communal discussions are where it's at. So I hate to cut them short because, but I'm glad that I just got to kick them off. Because at the end of the day, and I think I mentioned this last month, community is more important than any of these concepts. And the community that's being just started by the drumbeat of a little tea company starting little philosophy club meetings. What is so powerful about these hangs is the community, more so than any fascinating concepts or if they might not be that fascinating for people in the audience, but they are for us. But more so than anything that can be said is what's felt with the community. And I think I said this last month that the two followers, famous story of two followers approaching the Buddha and saying, what's most important, the Buddha, the Dharma, or the satsang, Sangha, community? Again, two Sanskrit words for the same thing, community. And as the story goes, without hesitation, the Buddha said, Sangha. Sangha is most important. Community is most important, which is so alien to our ears in the West, where we're like, no, the teaching is obviously more important than like the people to my left and right. You go to a class in college, you don't give a shit about the people to your left and right. Like, at least I did. And I was like, yeah, these people are kind of in my way to, like, if I can get to this famous professor's class, if I can get close, build a relationship with, or, all right, I want to hear it from his words, her words. That's going to be, the teaching. And it's just disorienting and yet beautifully reorienting to hear that it is the community is actually the most powerful aspect of any philosophy. And we're just touching on Swadharma, and I want to round out that conversation that it's also in the Gita that it says it's better to die in your Swadharma, in your nature, doing what you are created to do, and only you can do, than it is to live in your paradharma, which Justin just brought up, the contrast between Swadharma and paradharma, alien nature. To live in something that's alien to you, the community doesn't benefit. In fact, the community suffers because of the art that you could create, because of the parenting that you could take on. It doesn't need to be creating something in some material sense or conventional sense. But your entire community, we all miss out and suffer when one of us is living in a paradharma, paradharmic nature. Another way of saying it is, who you really are is your gospel to the world. Warts and all, vulnerabilities and all. I mean, just creating and stumbling, that could be the inspiring point to, you start something. Your neighbor, your friend sees it, it's like, wow, I could do something like that. You don't think much of it. It's got all of the warts of maybe a beginner in starting something that it has, but 3 out of your 10 friends get inspired to start something because of it. Who you truly are is your gospel to the world, but also, and that sounds so beautiful and simple, but also recognize, and this is an episode from Yoga for Your Intellect, which is, that's what YFY stands for. I think I recorded one in Daily Vedantic to talk about this concept as well, is to know that being who you truly are is the ultimate rebellion in its most beautiful and its most terrifying sense. Joseph Campbell said it beautifully. He said, the treasure you seek is in the cave you least want to enter. So if you take anything away from today in an intersection of creativity and philosophy, know that that is that sense of belonging you've been chasing. It is that sense of inner satisfaction that generates energy rather than dissipate it. But also know that it will be entering the cave you least want to enter. And it might be 5 years of you telling yourself that before you enter it. But the world can wait 5 years. And it benefits infinitely. Even if it takes 5 years of you telling yourself, okay, I don't want to enter that cave. And I know exactly, maybe you know this morning, exactly which cave that is that you do not want to enter. And 5 years will go by like this, 2 years, 2 months. Maybe it's later today. You're like, all right, fuck it, I'm going to enter that cave. But even if it's 5 years, 10 years, 7 years, however long it is, it's a blink of the eye, and we all get to benefit. We will all benefit infinitely from you entering it. But more than anyone in your community, you're the one that benefits the most, because it is the treasure you seek. And it is, quite the upside, even if it does feel a bit terrifying to go into that ultimate rebellion. All right, with that, we'll open it with questions for peeps. Yeah, Juliet.
Hello. Thank you for giving everyone permission to surrender. I think that's really beautiful, and to show that we can achieve success and belonging with surrender. I want to open...
It's the only way to receive it.
Yeah.
Not just a path. It is the only path. Yeah. At least that's what has been said for thousands of years. Take it or leave it.
Love it. I know there's some people who can will their way into success. There is a like...
It might be your definition.
Yeah.
But wherever they find themselves, it's not what they set out for. I mean, it's... we actually met at Justin Kahn's talk, co-founder of Twitch. Sells a company for $1 billion, $970 million. And 3 months later can't get out of bed for 4 days straight because he's so depressed. And when he was 22, he said, I want to sell a company for $1 billion. And did it.
Yeah.
So yes.
Yeah, goosebumps.
But go on.
Yeah, I want to bring a taboo subject here, which is love. It's the word love. Yeah, I think that we've talked a lot. I mean, magic mind. First of all, fully a Vedantist. Like, I'm like, if you ask me what's my religion, Vedantist. But I think, okay, there's a little bit of background here. I think that, one time somebody asked Ram Dass, why did Alan Watts drink himself to death? Like, he died of alcoholism. And Ram Dass said, Alan Watts, all he cared about was emptiness. Just empty the mind, empty, empty, empty Zen. And he never filled it with anything else. And I always was wondering too, I was like, what do you fill it with? And I think the answer is love. And I think you said the word devotion. I think the West, we like to think that philosophy is the love of wisdom, but I think in the East, it's the wisdom of love. And yeah.
When you say the word love, what do you mean?
I think it's God. I think it's the all of us.
You might be saying X for Y. When you say God, what do you mean?
The all of us, the unity.
And did we talk about unity today?
I think we talked about unity, but I'm curious how you guys bring love, devotion, heart, the matters of the heart, because we talk so much about the mind and where heart, for everybody here, comes into all of this. Yeah.
Great question. Thank you for asking. J-Man?
That is such a good question, and thank you for bringing the matters of the heart into this. And I had a really incredible chance to meet Ram Dass right before he passed away when we were working on music together. And in the explorations of philosophy, there's the little knowledge bombs, the little things that have stuck with and worked for me. And his whole thing from his lineage, which you have, many of you have heard, is loving awareness. So it's not just that I am aware, I am a sentient being, but I am love. And that the sense to fall back on that moment for me was one of the most impactful things about his teachings. And then I was with him like 6 months before he passed away, and he was sick with the flu. I'm just some random bro from LA coming to Maui. And his cat was dying in the other room. And someone said, hey, there's this musician here. Do you want to meet him? And he said, yeah. And I walked in and he was lying there kind of sweaty, and he like sat up and he had a stroke. And just the way that he looked at me when he entered the room was the sense of this transparent love, and that he, there's obviously so many other ways to experience this in life on much more mundane things than this whole crazy story. But the feeling of walking into that room and seeing him and experiencing what felt like just this crisp, pure compassion and love in that moment, I thought, God, I felt so free. And I thought in that moment, I want everyone else that I encounter to just have this like love, acceptance, vision. And I'm certainly not there, but I come back to that. And I thank you for bringing that up, because it is so easy to get lost in our heads, but that's really what it comes down to. And I have a question about this for you, because it is in the philosophy, and I have heard Swamiji talk about love, although it's not as present as Ram Dass. But how does that really come out of the text?
It's the whole philosophy, but it does come down to what you mean by love. Juliet, do you have a definition of love?
I actually think it's a state of being. It's a vibration, a state of being.
Yes.
Like an emotion. It is the high, I don't know if high frequency, I mean, don't be faster, but like with fear. With fear being a very low frequency versus the vibration of love, when we are all in synchrony. What is the word that Joe Dispenza uses? Where we're coherent. Yeah, where we're coherent. That's the most coherent vibration, I think, is love.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is such a great question on so many levels, because and one of my favorite aspects of this philosophy is it defines it. Love is seeing no otherness. In the same way it defines wisdom, which I had never heard a great definition for wisdom before, wisdom being the capacity to see the end in the beginning. Love is defined in Vedanta as seeing no otherness, as an identification. That is the unity. That is the whole philosophy, is seeing unity where we may have previously, where all but maybe one or two a generation sees plurality, sees separateness. In the same way that you identify with maybe your right hand or your left hand. Love is not like, oh, my left hand. Oh, I want to hug you. Oh, stay close. Stay in my pocket. Stay under my, authority. It's just, there's no real affection there. I just identify with it. I protect it. I serve it. It serves me. That's this beautiful symbiotic identification. Similarly, that is what this philosophy calls for all of us. It's like that is the last step, is identification with all. The further articulation isn't just seeing no otherness. That's love, and that might be between one or two people. It might be you and your family. But this philosophy calls us to see, and nearly every major tradition will call us to see no otherness in the world. So seeing no otherness in the world, meaning, and Swamiji will talk about it in terms of increasing rings of identification. So you identify with your immediate family, the four walls. You identify then with your friends, your community, then maybe your city, then your state, then your region, then your country, then all human beings, then all living beings. And if you can only identify with yourself or only identify with maybe your immediate family, which that's a stretch. I can count on one hand the people that truly love their immediate family that I've met. Truly would identify with their immediate family, even their children. But let's say you have that. Maybe you have it for your neighbors. There's beautiful work to be done to have an identification with all living beings. And all things itself. The illusion is that there are these separate things, these separate beings. It's an illusion, as we're told by this philosophy, that the separation, that identification of just us, being separate from everyone else, that is the illusion. The reality is just oneness. You could say the reality is just love, but the downside of that is in the West, we don't know what we mean by love. We synonymize it with affection, infatuation. I mean, we use the word love all the time. I'm hesitant to say the word love. Do I love my daughters? And I'm so comfortable saying sacrosanct things that I kind of say it without batting an eye, but I know that there are people that hear that and are like, well, a father has to love their daughters. I don't know many. Like I said, I don't know many parents that identify truly with their kids. Now, you can theoretically be like, oh, if I had kids, I'd do that. But let's take it to the practicality, reality of, well, do your parents identify with you? Do they really see you as an extension of them and give you that freedom? Or do they see it as an extension of what state they want to be in? How do they corral you into, like, how do I make sure that you're serving me in the state that I want to feel? But that love is so paramount within the philosophy that even the word philosophia, which you touched on, which is Greek for love of wisdom, when you look at those definitions of love of wisdom, it's identification with the capacity to see the end in the beginning. So if you go beneath these words that are highfalutin and kind of like sound beautiful, love of wisdom, and go to the definitions of them, it is an identification with the capacity to see. Or said another way, an identification with clarity. It's becoming clear. Or a state of being. But yeah, it's a beautiful question. Thank you for asking it. It's a topic that, yeah, I could talk about for 5 hours. Any other questions? On any front, by the way.
Hi, great to be here. I've really enjoyed the talk. I'm very grateful for you guys talking about the texts that you have read and which have informed your thinking. Could you perhaps give us maybe each of you a top 3 texts that you would recommend as like a starter pack or something?
That is such an awesome logistical question, because you can leave this talk and be like, where does they mention so many different things? So 10 years in, I'd say the first thing to start with is if you go to the dailyvedantic.com, there's actually a GPT I create of content and transcriptions of episodes. And you can use that to ask any logistical question that you might have literally right now, today, this afternoon, and it's pretty damn good. I'm lucky enough to be an angel investor in OpenAI, so I love ChatGPT. And that might be one of the best resources to start with, even asking this question, because it'll have great answers for this question. I can tell you the answer that it will likely say is if you want a 3-4 hour read, it would be maybe a 6-7 hour read if you're going slowly. And honestly, the best way of reading is 2 to 3 pages a day. So over the course of a year, perhaps, would be Vedanta treatise. That's where I'd start. I don't know if that's where you'd say to start as well, yeah. But that's where I'd say is, it's longer than Fall of Human Intellect, it's longer than Bhagavad Gita, but it's written in such plain English. No woo-woo, no, it's just like pure rational, analytical sense Vedanta treatise. And
depending on where your entry point is, I also think that the book that really got me was Message for the Age of Anxiety by Alan Watts. If you haven't gone down that rabbit hole, and that is a really good place to start. Radical Acceptance by Tara Brach, and then I read Fall of the Human Intellect first, but I actually, depending on how scared you are, I have a really fat book, but I also think that the Vedanta treatise is a great starting point.
Yeah, it is a bit not super intimidating, but fatter than these others that are great, that are mentioned as well. And Alan Watts, great on-ramp, but as Juliet said, the end of his story was dying of alcoholism. We are told over and over again by so many Eastern traditions to not judge the sage, to not look at their life and say like, oh, that's it's mere projection to assume why. but it's certainly not a life I wanted to embody. I really liked, the author of Vedanta Treatise. Who's probably top 5 proponent of Vedanta globally is Swami that we keep talking about, and there's a handful, Sadhguru, Sarvaprayananda. There are a handful that are super well known today. His books just happen to be the most analytical and easiest to follow, systematic in my view. But Vedanta Treatise, you could buy it and just start with the first 3 pages, see if it speaks to you. And that's what I often tell people. Start. If it doesn't, if it's like, oh, this isn't quite hooking me, then yeah, you can go with maybe if anyone's ever read like Untethered Soul, it's all Vedanta. And sadly, these authors don't refer to it as Vedanta. Carl Jung rarely ever gave credit to Vedanta. Joseph Campbell was the secretary of the Vedanta Society of New York for 3 years. Never really talked about specifically Vedanta. And I think that was for the time. That was like 30 years ago, 100 years ago, maybe that was the right approach to colloquialize things, make it as accessible as possible. But Vedanta Treatise, I think these concepts, people are now, Elon Musk talks every day about living in a simulation. And in Silicon Valley, they've been talking about that for like the last 10 years. So I'm like, yeah, I think people are ready for a lot of this stuff as it was and as it really is. So yeah, start with the first 3 pages maybe.
And one other thing is there's an app called Vedanta World, which we do the e-learning on, but there's also a bunch of free podcasts on there, and that's a really good place. I like listening to this in addition to reading it, and it's like, I think there's a handful of free hour lectures, and then even it's like $5 a month too. And I think that for me, that was even a better on-ramp than going into the book.
It's true, yeah. Vedanta World is the ashram's app, and it's just crazy. You can listen to this stuff from your couch in LA, and 30, 50 years ago, you'd have to go to, halfway around the world, go to India to hear it. Yeah, Ricken. Okay, awesome. Holocaust of Attachment is free. It's also one of the great on-ramps. So Swamiji has written 12 books. Most famous is Vedanta Treatise. Holocaust of Attachment for like 2 or 3 years there. I recommended that as the first one for people to read. And its title is about as sobering as the read can be, the Holocaust of Attachment. But yeah, there are these digital tools that I'll sometimes recommend the app, or if someone's coming to a talk like this, sometimes I say just jump right into Vedanta Treatise. But that is a great one as well. And it sounds like it's free now. It wasn't before. So yeah, Holocaust of Attachment. All right, any other questions? When we got a mic, we can pass around. Yes, right up here.
First off, again, thank you so much for hosting this, and so much wisdom and really like practical knowledge, how succinctly you're able to share it. My question, it's a little bit twofold in terms of when it comes to like creativity, which you shared, and the emergence and the surrender, but also the neutrality in which we want to walk, of the non-attachment with it as well. How do you balance that of like, I practice non-dualism, but it's this practice of like holding your human, but also holding a vision, and also like the polarity with the non-duality, and holding that all together and walking through life without being like skewing one way or another. So my question really is like, what practicality do you have, or advice you have to really like embody that wisdom and like move forward as you want to create and have your offerings, which I love the nuance of an offering versus a diary entry. Like that hit me so hard as I'm, creating and wanting to be in service and devoting myself to spirit, like that walk and balance, if that all makes sense.
It's such a great practical question, yeah.
So practical. There's this specific type of journaling I do, but it's really just about reflection, because I think with journaling, we can write about what we're feeling, about what's going on in life, or getting through ideas. But I almost think of it as looking at what I'm attached to and auditing, because it's so easy just to, we get in these attachments. It's not that, for me, this philosophy hasn't made me not be attached. It's just more that I can catch it sooner and sooner. I'm like, oh, actually I'm attached. And so the process of my morning reflections, is everything. I feel like that is such a huge percentage of the whole process.
Yeah, it's self-auditing is such a great word. Auditing, you just see these things happening. You can you see the anatomy of them through a practice and a recognition. To answer your question straight on, it's knowing our level. and just being like, I can't just skip to, equanimity in anything that happens, and success or failure, someone blows up, child sick, wakes me up at 2 a.m. and I've got a big day tomorrow, and recognition, identification with all. I got to know my level. I'm like, I'm not there. But I can also recognize and audit, and knowing our level that's the preemption for the work. Like the preemptive state is, I need to do this work every morning. 15 minutes might be of reflection, but so it's not like it's this huge, you have to flip your life around. But knowing your level is a concept that's used often within philosophy, just knowing like, damn, I got a lot of work to do. That was really frustrating when I was just woken up again and again and again from 2 a.m. to 6:30, and I missed my morning reflection time, which is a hilarious thing to be frustrated about. But the auditing is such a great point, because then you start to see the anatomy of so the definition of stress is it is desire interrupted. 2 words. All stress, all agitation. Desire interrupted. You have a desire for something, something's interrupting it. Oh no, I'm so pissed off. Elle, our 6-year-old, go back to bed. Please, just go back to bed. And it didn't happen. Luckily, at this point, she'll wake me up at 2 nights ago from 2 until 6, and I'm like actually quite pacific with it. I'm pleasantly surprised myself that unperturbed. But 3-4 years ago, these kinds of things would totally agitate me, because I had a really strong set desire for an outcome, whether it's that big day of work, whether it's a release of a product, launch of a company, and get so tied into the outcomes that this agitation you boil over with agitation of things not going your way. And 10 years ago, had no idea the anatomy of that agitation, of that stress. I would think it's like, no, I need to work harder. I need to do more. I need to force through just sheer will. I'm going to make this go well. Not realizing that it's, I'm just investing in that desire more. I'm just adding more dynamite to the thing that's going to blow up again and again and again. Versus you see the agitation and you're like, okay, I still have that attachment to that outcome, but what? Oh, that agitation's coming from like a desire. What am I wishing for tomorrow morning that's really bugging me tonight at 2 a.m.? Oh, I've got that call at 9 a.m. that I don't want to go wrong, or that morning study that I really want to do, and now I'm feeling like I'm not going to get that morning study because this is the 3rd time to be woken up. And that understanding that anatomy it's the difference between taking the load off and relieving that pressure, and the difference of being like, no, I got to do more. All right, that meeting, I'm so pissed off, but okay, I'm going to yell at my 6-year-old to go back to, I'm going to get really like vocal, forceful, and I'm going to vocalize my desire even more, sternly. Go back to bed. Not realizing, you just added like 50,000 tons to the plane. Instead of taking weight off, you just added a bunch of weight, and I am going to get to that meeting at 9 a.m. suffering from a string of 13 different things I did that caused even more agitation. Yeah, great question. We'll do one more question, and then we'll open up just for people to hang, chat, come up and say hey, or chat with each other. Yeah, right in the back. Phoenix, good to see you.
You as well, James. So I have a question about just meaning in general. I guess when you realize
meaning in general?
Yeah, I guess when you realize that a lot of what we see in the world is just our perception and us projecting into what the reality is, how do you make meaning out of nothing? Because there are examples of you wanting to continue with Magic Mind and build that and share the philosophy of the Vedas with the world. You have people like Ray Dalio who realize he can tweak the financial system and do a lot of great things. But then there are also people who just become priests or go on a farm and decide that, a lot of this doesn't matter. I can just raise my cows and my horses.
Well, all of those and potentially none of those have meaning to them. Ray Dalio actually studies with Swamiji and is the host. When Swami, he's 97 now, but when he would go to New York, he'd stay with with Ray. Ray's a big hedge fund manager in the world. And so, yeah, he's quite switched on, Ray Dalio. We all have our parts to play, and it is in that surrender to that role, surrender to a duty-bound existence, and immediate peace follows. What that phrase says to meaning is you don't make meaning. There is no meaning to be made in the outside world. Now, I said earlier, if you take anything away from this, and I mentioned one of my favorite knowledge bombs, I'll say another one that if perhaps this one hits for any of us that are on these ambitious paths, that perhaps this knowledge bomb is the one thing to take away for you all. I know it was for me when I first heard it in a certain lecture, that you could take this away and chew on this for 20 years. It's not out there. This philosophy talks about the identification, becoming who you truly are, the awareness of who you truly are, discovery of who you truly are. And notice the word discovery. It's not finding, it's discovering. We put all these coverings and then we work our entire lives around this, like being in a tiny little shed instead of just staring up and getting the beauty of sunlight. We're just like adding all these fluorescent lights around us, not realizing it's not about adding, it's about removing, and you get the beauty of 10 million lights right on you from the most natural source of the sun that's just sitting there waiting for you to discover who you really are. There is no meaning to be made out there. And it could be meaning on the deep end, the profound, the philosophical approach. You're like, where is the meaning? Where is life's meaning? Or it could just be, which, again, it applies there. There is no meaning to be made in the outside world. Or it could be as simple as like, I got to make rent. Because that rent will give me stability, or that stability will make me feel happy. Then I can do what I want to do, and then I'll have satisfaction, and then I'll chase freedom. This philosophy says what we really want is freedom. Every pursuit is a misguided approach to our most ultimate desire, which is freedom. Freedom to be. Freedom to be who we are. And we're caught up, and the more ambitious we are, the more Frankenstein of pursuits. We've got 14 different pursuits, 12, 10, 5, maybe it's one. If I sell a company for $1 billion, then I can be who I am. And you realize, oh shit, no, I'm like no closer to being who I truly am than I was before, because it's not out there. And there is nothing to be made from this illusion that there is an out there. There is just an in here. There only ever was an in here. And the most beautiful and the most sad aspect of what this philosophy says to us is that you are that. That infinite meaning that we're searching for, it's your natural state inside. There's nothing you can add to it. And I say most beautiful and sad because it's most beautiful because it is our natural state. But every lighthouse, every sage says over and over again, saddest part is that we're told it. I can say it. My 6-year-old can say the rules in the household to her 3-year-old sister. She loves telling the rules and then breaking them 30 seconds later or disregarding them. We can say it, we can hear it, and yet the sages say over and over again, the saddest part is we don't know it. So that meaning, making meaning, it's both scary and delightfully simple. That there is no meaning to be made out there. Because whatever it is, it's not out there because the out there that we think is out there isn't. All right. On that note, we'll open it up for everybody to hang, grab coffee. Magic Mind, thank you all so much for coming. And thank you to Neuhaus and Merritt and Tyler for doing all the logistics. Thank you, last but not least, to Justin for coming and sharing his experience as well. Thank you, Justin.